This is the House of Commons, as never seen before.
Look in!
Over the last year, we've been filming behind the scenes with unprecedented access.
That's where our laws are set, is the people that we're run by.
It's a year that's been one of the most dramatic in its recent history.
This is a travesty of our parliamentary proceedings.
There are people sitting next to me who've been in the House for like decades just saying I've never seen anything like it.
In this episode, we uncover the hidden secrets of party control.
There's the whip. It's good, isn't it?
The tactical manoeuvring away from the public eye.
Basically, democracy lost and the government won.
And the human struggles of towing the party line.
Good boy.
All played out in the ancient palace, where new political fault lines threaten the old order.
It's got stuck. I can't believe it.
As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. Division! Clear the lobby!
Clear the lobby!
A vote is underway. 500 division bells ring out across the Commons. Almost every day, MPs hurry to the chamber to vote in person, leaving meetings and speeches, food and drink abandoned as the House divides.
I left a nice hot cup of tea in my room to come down and vote.
Forward.
Well, we've got 8 minutes, so it's pretty tight, but it's tight for everybody, and I'm fortunate enough that I've got a dog that moves pretty smartish.
Labour's Steve Rotherham has his office at the far end of the Commons estate, which gives him one of the longer journeys to the chamber.
No problems getting there. If I've got my cloak on, I could probably do it in about a Superman time of about 3.5 minutes. Division, clear the lobbies, and off we go.
For the Tory, Jacob Rees-Mogg, from his office inside the main 19th century palace, it's a cakewalk.
If the division bell goes, I can be down the chamber in under 2 minutes. I'm also not very energetic, so I don't like running. I like to walk at a steady pace.
It can be quite busy, and there are loads of different ways to get to where you need to get to, so you try and find the quickest way through.
As the clock runs down, MPs flood into 2 lobbies, lining each side of the chamber. One for no, and one for aye. In a ritual with its roots in the days of Henry VIII, MPs vote with their feet. For the most part, MPs vote as their party tells them.
Thomas Docherty.
Especially if they want promotion.
This is where more than one career in the last 180 years has crashed to a halt.
For the last 70 years, British politics has been dominated by 2 parties, Labour and the Conservatives. Party loyalty has dictated how the central laws of the land are made and unmade, and political careers determined.
The ayes to the right, 251. The noes to the left, 242.
But recently, the old order has come under threat. This Parliament has already seen a record number of MPs rebel against their own parties. One leading member of what's called the Awkward Squad is the Tory MP, Peter Bone. Since the last election, he's voted against the government nearly 150 times.
When there's a division bell rings in the House of Commons, There are 600 MPs who are going to vote. Most MPs have no idea what's being debated in the House of Commons, and they turn up and the whips tell them which lobby to go for.
The whips are shadowy teams of MPs who enforce party discipline. They call MPs like Peter Bone a whip's nightmare.
The whips, quite regularly, some of them swear at me. But if they swear at you, then, hang on a minute, won't they want me for another vote later on?
The whip's job is to keep their MPs united behind the party leader and quell rebellions by the independent-minded.
Food labelling. Now, this is our policy, so if a vote is called, we expect that everybody will be able to participate in that, and if necessary, we'll put tellers in.
The whip's motto is that whipping, like stripping, should be done in private. But the Labour Chief Whip, Rosie Winterton, has invited us into her lair.
So this is the Opposition Chief Whip's office, and there's the whip. It's good, isn't it? I only use it on the members when they're especially well behaved. I haven't actually murdered anybody yet. There are no thumb screws in here, as you will have probably noticed. Well, I'll get them out later if you want. So, you know, the popular image is of rather a sinister operation, whereas actually what we do like to do is to convince people because we think the arguments are right.
Bearing his wand of office, a senior Tory whip, Desmond Swayne MP, heads into the Commons chamber.
Speaker, sir, I have a message from Her Majesty the Queen.
He's performing one of the arcane rituals that litters the world of the whips. Part of his duty is to act as Her Majesty's mole in the Commons.
I'm reporting to the House a message from Her Majesty the Queen. And then I retreat, walking backwards.
Are you good at that?
You'll have to wait and see.
By ancient tradition, he reverses out of the chamber as a royal messenger. A more modern means of influencing their MPs is the fact that each party's whips decide who gets which room in the House.
There was once accommodation whip. It's not a job I'd wish on anyone.
Why not?
Well, it involves exactly that. You're a bit of an estate agent to an extent. You take someone up to this ghastly room and say, well, take some of the furniture out, it'll look bigger, or, you know.
The whips pride themselves on knowing everything about their MPs, and until recently the Tory whips kept a dirt book. It contains sensitive information on their members, which could be used to persuade them to vote the right way.
The notion that whipping involves torture and all sorts of sinister dark arts may have been true in the deep, distant past, but it certainly isn't true these days.
In the past, the Chief Whip would say, I really don't care about the policy, just get in and do as you're told. Now, people will come and say, Don, why are we voting this way? I have to know why. I have to have negotiated it in advance to make sure that when they hear what it is, they'll say, that's fine, I'm happy to go that way.
Jenny Willett is a Liberal Democrat whip and one of a new breed of party police. She's also a mother of two.
Why do I go to nursery?
Where?
No, why do I go
Why?
to nursery?
So that because it's boring in my office when I'm working, isn't it?
Does it make you bored?
No. Sometimes. There's definitely an overlap between being a parent and being a whip, I suspect. Having to persuade someone who doesn't want to do something of exactly the best way to do it. And generally with my colleagues, I have found that I can use much more of the carrot than the stick.
She drops her children in the recently established Commons nursery every day that she goes to her office.
Am I a persuasive person? I guess I must be. I'm not sure that I conform to the popular image of an MP either, let alone the popular image of a whip.
Lib Dem MPs must apply to Jenny Willett if they want to absent themselves from a major vote.
I do get people sidling up to me if I'm downstairs or in the voting lobby. I do get people sidling up to me and saying, sort of, you know, Jenny, please. I try very, very hard to make sure that I'm completely even-handed. And there are some things that I will prioritise. I think if someone has a medical appointment, or if, you know, someone wants to go and see their child in a Christmas play, that's the sort of thing you never get to do twice. So that's kind of important.
Internal tensions within the coalition are a symptom of a wider fracturing across the traditional party system. Many MPs are becoming less fearful of the power of the whips and more independent-minded.
I can't imagine a more difficult time for whips officers of both the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives than the next few months as we lead up to a general election, because our job is to keep the show on the road. The rest of the party are out there trying to defeat each other.
David Cameron and his whips must juggle working with their Lib Dem coalition partners on the one hand and with the awkward squad of Tory Eurosceptics on the other. The battle to project an image of party unity becomes increasingly tricky.
Is it easy? No. Is it getting more difficult? Yes. Why is that? Well, I think a lot of members of Parliament quite rightly see that their authority comes from the people who elect them, and they want to stand up for that. You have to try and get this balance that politics is a combination. It's a team enterprise. I think it's just something we have to work harder at trying to understand and manage.
It's spring 2014, and a year to go until Parliament is dissolved for the general election. Across Westminster, clocks are put forward to mark the start of British summertime. The biggest challenge for the Commons clockmakers is resetting the world's most iconic clock.
We're getting ready to advance the hands to 12 o'clock.
Time is always a key weapon that's used by the government and its opponents in Commons battles. The coming year will see many of the best-laid plans thwarted by the ticking clock. For 4 hours in the middle of the night, the clock that the Luftwaffe couldn't stop is silent.
That's it. Stopped.
With time on hold in Westminster, it's a rare chance to carry out essential maintenance on the 160-year-old mechanism. 5 minutes before Big Ben is restarted, Paul Robeson, a Commons clockmaker, dials the speaking clock to get the right time precisely.
At the third stroke, it will be 11:55 precisely.
And the chime is tested to ensure it's within a second of Greenwich Mean Time. For loyal MPs and rebels alike, the demands on their time are never-ending.
You've been invited to What's the Point of the Human Rights Act with Diana Rose, QC, on the 28th of October.
Nope.
Would you like to celebrate Anglesey, the premier county of Wales?
Nope.
The British Retail Consortium annual reception?
Nope.
The Institute for Government?
Nope.
And Energy Security?
Nope.
And then we are back to...
Hey, back to
Yay,
starting.
all your invites.
The first thing you have to learn when you get an MP, you come in here, you arrive on the first day and there's a foot fight. 80% of it, you just say no.
Peter Bone has spent 9 years in the Commons, where he's seen as a maverick and something of a joker. His regular gag is that his wife is the yardstick against which everything must be judged.
Now, I know Mrs. Bone is following this very closely today. Mrs. Bone was saying, Mrs. Bone and I, Mrs. Bone wanted to know.
Mrs. Bone wants to know what the Prime Minister is going to do about it.
I do feel now that a very big part of my life is trying to give pleasure to Mrs. Bone.
It's not my feelings, it's what the people are telling me.
When we use a Mrs. Bone story
Yeah,
to the
it's
Prime
not
Minister,
me.
Mrs. Bone is saying Prime Minister. It isn't actually Mrs. Bone. It's the sum of what my constituents are telling Jenny.
See you later.
Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Au revoir.
Jenny Bone is her husband's executive secretary in the Commons and now focuses on his work in the constituency.
I was diagnosed with breast cancer in March of this year. It's probably the first time in our marriage life that I can remember his jaw dropped and he was speechless. He could not say anything. So chemotherapy is the cause of my hairstyle at the minute, but it will grow back.
Peter Bone believes passionately that Britain should leave the EU, and Europe as ever is the toxic issue that splits the Conservatives. A surge in support for UKIP in the recent European elections heightens the threat to Tory unity. The serial rebel Peter Bone will go to almost any length to rattle his party's cage. With the coalition unable to agree over a referendum on Britain's EU membership, he's decided to take action. He's holding a referendum of his own in his Midlands constituency.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry to interrupt Friday afternoon. Everyone will get a ballot paper over the next few days asking you whether you want to stay in or come out of the European Union. We want Middle England to vote.
150 miles further north, Labour's Steve Rotherham is another independent-minded MP. But he couldn't be further in outlook from Peter Bone. A pro-European and former bricklayer, he joined the Commons as part of the new intake in 2010.
It's still a very strange place to go on a daily basis to work, Westminster. I mean, you see people. When I first went down there, I was bumping into people who were now colleagues of mine who I'd only ever seen on the telly. And you're like, oh my God, that's such a one, isn't it? Isn't that Harriet Harman, isn't that?
Steve Rotherham wants to use Europe to improve the well-being of his fellow Liverpudlians.
I think on building sites there'll be a huge range of different views on Europe. I'm pretty much a pro-European. I've seen the huge benefits that Europe can bring to a city like Liverpool. Doing the job that we do sometimes, you can go all week and not really see any particular progress, even though you've probably worked your little cotton socks off all week. I quite like building, and it's very cathartic when you're doing something physical with your hands, and then at the end of the day you can see something that you've done, some progress. That was the danger. The crown. Oh, saved it.
Back in Westminster, another crown lies uneasy. A group of Tory Eurosceptic rebels are planning to challenge David Cameron's policy on Europe. Among them is the proudly traditional Jacob Rees-Mogg, sometimes known as the Member for the 18th Century. He's an expert on Commons procedure, and he's a details obsessive. Every time he speaks in the chamber, he checks with Hansard, the Commons official reporters, to ensure that the written record is correct.
Thank you. As always, you've made my mushrooms much better than they were. It's just this bit. Had some truth in it.
Some truth.
I think that then that makes
Fine.
that makes sense.
I can do that for you.
Brilliant.
Certainly.
It's great fun going up there because you see your words written out in a way that flows mellifluously without all the ums and ahs and bits and pieces, and they turn fairly ordinary speeches into elegant English.
There is an enormous amount of bluff when people tell us what our Constitution is, and the more authoritatively people say they know what the Constitution is, the more they get away with it. And I know because it's a bluff. It's a bluff I'm not ashamed to use myself from time to time.
His self-deprecating style disguises his genuine concern about what he believes is happening to Britain's unwritten constitution.
I'm against the ability of Europe to pass laws that my electors and the electors in the country at large do not want. That's fundamentally what it is about. The rest of it is essentially flim-flam.
He's greatly concerned about the government's plan to accept the European arrest warrant.
And from what we know of the contents, some of the TTIP will mean that it will have to be agreed by the EU itself, including the European Parliament.
It's intended to catch serious criminals, but he fears British citizens could be extradited to EU countries for minor offences. The dispute will lead to one of the most bitterly contested nights the House has seen for years. For his part, Steve Rotherham is about to try to use Brussels, so often accused of bureaucratic meddling in British affairs, to aid his new campaign.
Hello, darling. How are you? Hi.
He's meeting Frances Malloy, the mother of a young man who was the victim of a coach accident caused by 20-year-old tyres.
Yeah. But I'll mention, obviously...
He wants to get a new law passed in Parliament on tyre safety. So he's organised a meeting with leading figures in the tyre industry.
I think it's important that whilst we all have an understanding of what happens when something goes wrong, nobody has a greater understanding than somebody who's had first-hand experience, if you like, of the devastating effects.
Michael should have returned home to me with muddy boots, dirty clothes and the exhaustion that goes along with an amazing weekend at a music festival. He was on the cusp of being signed for a music deal and he was heading home excited at the prospect of this. He never made it. To lose him is life-changing. To find out it's because of a second-hand tyre is excruciating to live with, and it will be my torture forever. Thank you.
Frances, that's really why MPs should get involved in these sort of things.
Looking back over the last few years, there's been some tragic road accidents involving tyres, and to pick up Frances's point, they were all avoidable, and every one, alas, was a human tragedy, like Frances's.
The first thing that we're doing is a visit to Brussels, and we've got literally the great and the good in regard to the European Union, who are attending a series of meetings over there to see whether we can look at this from a European dimension as well. But that won't stop us in parallel doing what we need to do and pushing this government. Thanks a lot.
Downing Street, July the 14th. Ministers are summoned to Number 10 for the biggest cabinet reshuffle since David Cameron became Prime Minister. The aim is to give the cabinet a facelift and respond to the threat of UKIP. William Hague, who's retiring at the next election, is moved from the Foreign Office to the job of Leader of the Commons.
For those who are waiting to hear what's going to happen to them in that reshuffle, pretty tense. But not at all tense for people like me who, in this case, on the inside of what's going on and actually asked for the change. The Leader of the House of Commons office. But nobody said this was anything other than a rather cruel profession.
Pro-European ministers like Ken Clarke and others, characterised as pale, male and stale, are given the chop. The controversial Michael Gove is shifted from education to become chief whip. So a passionate Eurosceptic is now in charge of party discipline. and the strongly Eurosceptic Defence Minister Philip Hammond is given the plum job of Foreign Secretary.
This is officially the Foreign Secretary's office. It's very beautiful, and we are hugely privileged to be able to camp in here at least for the next 9 months until the election, and we may be moving off again somewhere else.
It's not bad, is it? I wouldn't mind it as my porter's room. It's not very relaxed, but yeah, someone's done all right for themselves.
Another of the Eurosceptics promoted is Desmond Swayne. After years working in the Tory whip's office, he's been made a minister in the Department for International Development.
They say once a whip, always a whip.
I know there'll be a lot of people depressed today with the reshuffle. Within a week, it'll all be forgotten. The new ministers and the ministers, and everybody will move on. I see my role in Parliament. I'm not here as representing the government. I'm here to scrutinise the government. And it doesn't matter who's in power. The new Chief Whip has been in for about 2 hours and I've already rebelled against him.
The most eye-catching feature of the reshuffle are the new women ministers. David Cameron has been stung by criticism that he has a problem with female voters and too few women on his front bench.
People might not believe this, but you have no idea what you're going to be offered before you're offered it. He formally asks you to join the government, so it's a very formal meeting, and I thought about it for about 3 seconds and said, thank you very much.
Don't there's any tokenism going on here?
No, I don't.
The new ministers have risen up the greasy pole in a House of Commons that's still regarded by many as resembling a Victorian gentleman's club. The reality for many female MPs, especially those juggling family and a career, is a long way from the glamour of the Downing Street catwalk.
Oh, it's not a boat. Goodness me, this is weird. I have to take lots of unusual routes. I didn't know half of these places existed until I had kids. So there are all sorts of random service lifts and things that you end up using. Come on then. Come on, in you go.
Her crowded schedule means her Commons office becomes the family dining room.
Right, sit yourself down.
You need some peas?
If I was doing a normal job that meant that I did normal working hours, then we'd be home in the evening and we'd all sit down and have supper together. And we kind of have it's quite difficult in this job to have a routine of sorts for children, so actually this is kind of our routine, really.
Was that nice? Have you finished?
If there's a division in the evening when we're all having supper, then the boys stay here with my husband. If I'm here on my own with the children, that's much more challenging. That's the point at which we all just drop everything and run. Sometimes we have to go and run for votes, don't we?
Yes.
Yeah. You're very good at running through the corridors now, aren't you?
I run faster than anyone.
You do run faster than anyone. My choice of job and what I do has a huge impact on what my children and my husband can do, and affects their lives immeasurably. And sometimes I do get worried about that.
24 hours after the reshuffle, and Steve Rotherham's campaign on tyre safety is gaining ground. He's secured 10 minutes on the floor of the House to make his case for a change in the law.
Right, let's just do it, see what works, see what doesn't work.
Okay. The purpose of this bill, therefore, is threefold: to raise awareness of tyre safety.
With 10 minutes to speak, he wants every word to count.
Wake, things like that, wake. It's a very Scouse word. And even weird, I say W-I-R-D, weird. And I tried to say word in there. Word and work. If it is rubbish, it was Gavin's fault. If it's great, of course, then I take the credit.
He's not making that up, are
That's politics.
It is. It's my job to make you look good.
Steve Rotherham must seek the advice of the Commons clerks on the protocol for introducing what's called a 10-minute rule bill in the chamber.
We're up another floor.
Like many new MPs who came in at the last election, he still struggles to find his way round the Commons labyrinth.
Let's have a look. Oh no, it definitely bends round. That's not it. Where would I get the public bills office, please?
Oh yeah, you'll have to go up to the 3rd floor. I think the easiest way is to go
down. You've got to get in the lift.
And the lift from the back of the Speaker's chair.
It's like a rabbit warren, this place. There's corridors everywhere. You would have thought the 2 lifts would have ended up in the same place. I found it.
Finally, in the right office, he asked the clerk about the process when the Speaker calls him to introduce his bill.
So he will say Steve Rotherham, and then you will walk down and
That's
go
right.
to the bar.
Yeah.
And bow the first time.
5 small steps, bow.
Bow.
5
And
small
then-
steps, bow, and then
yeah,
round
you're at the mace.
the left.
Yeah.
Yeah, marvellous.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure even I can't screw that one up.
Order. 10-minute rule motion. Mr. Steve Rotherham.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make it an offence to operate a public service vehicle with tyres that are 10 or more years old. Mr. Speaker, there are plenty of other rubber-related products that people would be rightly cautious about trusting if they were decades old. So why would anybody trust their safety to a 20-year-old tyre?
He's passed the first stage as he formally presents his draft bill to the House. Though it's still a long way from becoming law, he hopes the issue will now get media attention.
You know, if this gets reported, as hopefully it will do, people will be aware that when they get onto a coach or a bus, potentially they could be on tyres that are 20 years of age. So, if anything, if the campaign gathers pace, the government might act anyway outside of what I've proposed.
In late July, MPs leave the Commons for the summer recess. And it's not just the old political order that's facing upheaval. Carpets are uprooted, walls repapered, and the mock Gothic Palace of Westminster is to be given a major facelift. Strangers' Dining Room, where MPs can take visitors, is one of the most ornate of Parliament's numerous eating places. Through painstaking historical research, it's been restored to its Victorian heyday. But the most formidable challenge is the building's cast-iron roof, one of the biggest in the world.
Basically, it's a cast-iron roof, and some of the roofs were in a shocking condition. It's been leaking a long time. Yeah, a long time.
The roof is being renovated for the first time since Hitler's warplanes bombed Parliament no fewer than 14 times.
So this tower in particular is very bad, mainly because it got hit during the war. So there's a lot of historical repairs on it. A lot of the nodes aren't the original nodes. They have these repair plates which should sit flush together. But as water gets in and it jacks and it rusts, it pulls apart. And that's when you get something like this, which you can literally fit your hand in.
The last thing you want to see is the government building fall apart, because that means your government's falling apart.
We're standing on top of one of the towers of Westminster, and this view won't be seen again for another 150 years until another scaffold's built here. Probably the most unique view in all of London.
As construction workers dismantle the roof, 60 miles away, there's a small earthquake in Clacton. On August the 28th, Douglas Carswell, a Tory Eurosceptic MP, resigns his seat. He says he'll fight the resulting by-election in his Essex seaside constituency as a UKIP candidate. He cites as his reason David Cameron's refusal to get serious on Europe. Four weeks later, as the leaf falls at Westminster, there's further bad news for David Cameron. Another Tory MP, Mark Reckless, has an announcement to make at the UKIP annual conference, in a voice rather like John Major's.
Today, I am leaving the Conservative Party.
First one Tory defector, now another. In the eve of the Conservative conference, he poses the question, how many more could go?
One of the bookies' favourites to go is Peter Bone, once the joker in the Tory pack, but now seen as a major threat.
How long have you been married?
Too long. Far too long.
Jenny Bone has come for breakfast in the Commons, as her husband has agreed to appear on the satirical quiz show, Have I Got News for You?
I think you're daft going on it.
Well, that is one thing we do
not
agree
to
on.
say anything.
Now, this is an important decision. Do I need my hair cut?
No, don't. No, it looks fine, Peter.
You really think the hair's all right?
Do you know, I think you should be more concerned about what you're going to say. I'm going to iron his shirt for the Have I Got News for You programme this evening.
And how much did that shirt cost?
Because Peter certainly wouldn't know how to iron. £10.
From? Down from?
From £45.
There you go. What good girl she is. Come on, let's go and see if we can find somewhere to iron.
Is it in the bowels?
It is in the bowl.
Is there an iron in there, Peter?
That's right.
Are you going to stand guard in case anybody
come on,
male
then.
naked bodies
Naked.
come in? Really, this is probably against. Oh God, there is an iron. Seriously, there's somebody's shoes there, though. They'd probably go out running.
This room is used by members to get changed in and iron, and it does say gentlemen members only on the door, but I'm sure that's from olden days.
Are there showers here, Peter? Because
Yes, showers, baths.
I certainly don't
You
want
can
to
have-
see a naked body.
Come on in. We've broken enough rules. Let's get out of here.
Thank goodness nobody came in.
Peter Bone will use the show to fuel speculation about his intentions and exasperate the Tory leadership.
I do media all the time because it's a good way of communicating with my constituents. Colleagues who won't go on the media, I think, miss a trick. And also, ones won't put themselves out for the media. Because if you put themselves out for the media, they'll remember you next time and come and ask you again.
I mean, as we've got you here, any other Tories going to defect to UKIP?
No, because they've all given me cast iron guarantees that they're not going to.
If I read a list and we get a close-up, can we get a close-up on Peter to see how you react when I read a list of names? Peter Bone MP, what's your reaction? Slight nostril flare, I think, there.
Peter Bone remains a Tory, for now. But October the 13th marks an historic day for the Commons. Douglas Carswell has swept to victory in Clacton as UKIP's first elected MP. Or as Nigel Farage puts it, the UKIP fox has entered the Westminster henhouse.
It's good to be back. Even the corridors seem brighter. I really do feel invigorated, and I'm more than happy to stand out as in a minority of one.
Escorted by the father of the House, Sir Peter Tapsell, and the young Tory Eurosceptic MP, Zac Goldsmith, the new member prepares to be sworn in.
Don't forget the bow right at the beginning before you move. There's a chap.
Congratulations on your election, Mr. Carswell. Thank you.
I think we can go forward now.
Shall we?
Go through? Yes, let's go forward. Let's do it.
I swear by Almighty God that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, her heirs and successors according to the law. So help me God.
Douglas Carswell's first challenge as a new MP in a new party is securing an office in the Commons. He sees himself as a lone wolf. But he hasn't entirely escaped the clutches of the party whips.
I didn't realise this, but there are all sorts of weird things about Westminster, and one of the oddities I've just discovered is that government whips, in other words, Conservative Party whips, decide where MPs get offices. I actually had to go into the whip's office and drag a whip out a couple of evenings ago to get this office, but I've got it and I'm delighted. When I was a member of the Conservative Party, I would get a constant stream of emails, many of which I just deleted, telling me how to vote on certain things and what the line to take was on things. and now I have to think for myself. Yeah, it's a slightly strange feeling because I guess this is UKIP's Whip's HQ.
Douglas Carswell's new office is a modern extension to the 19th century palace. A few metres above his head, a battle far removed from the political fray is playing out. Angel, the Harris Hawk, is fighting to keep Parliament free from pigeons and their droppings.
I wouldn't say I'm protecting the members of Parliament here. I think this is more of protecting the fabric of the building than protecting the members. They might get some benefit because they wouldn't get pooed on. I think that was a bit of liver. Narrowly missed my mouth, which is always nice when it misses.
Across London, Steve Rotherham is about to set off for Brussels. Unlike UKIP and the Eurosceptics, he thinks the EU can work for MPs. Today, he's going on a fact-finding mission to help inform his Commons campaign on tyre safety.
We're 8, aren't we?
7.
7?
Coach 8.
Well, we're off to Brussels, to the European Parliament. Believe it or not, a lot of our legislation around tyres is European, so it comes from the European Parliament, and all it obviously does is part our own Parliament, the UK Parliament, enacts the regulations passed down. So we want to find out what the plans are in regard to them looking to specifically develop some legislation, some policies around the age of tyres.
Once in Brussels, Steve Rotherham will discover there are no plans to legislate against old tyres. So he'll have to try and get it through the Commons. It's October the 29th, 3 weeks before the Tory defector Mark Reckless is to fight a by-election as the new UKIP candidate in the Kent seat of Rochester and Strood. The government has promised a vote on the controversial European arrest warrant, which allows for the rapid extradition of criminal suspects between EU member states. Ed Miliband supports the government on the measure, but he seeks to exploit Tory divisions over Europe.
Mr. Speaker, a vital tool that has helped to bring murderers, rapists and paedophiles to justice is a European arrest warrant. Why is he delaying having a vote on it? It's a by-election in Rochester and Strood. He's paralysed by fear of another backbench rebellion on Europe.
Mr. Speaker, there's only one problem with his question, which is we are going to have a vote. We're going to have it for the Rochester by-election. His questions have just collapsed.
It's November the 10th, the day of the planned vote on the European arrest warrant. The first signs of trouble arrive when it's not specifically included in the list of measures on European law enforcement coming before the Commons.
The Whip's prepared us a brief on the sort of technical details of the motion before the House today, and the name of the motion, you know, it was trailed as being all about the European arrest warrant. It doesn't even appear in the wording of the motion.
The government has summoned its MPs with a 3-line whip, which means they must come and vote. But as the European arrest warrant has been excluded from the motion, Tory Eurosceptics are planning to rebel.
Only a handful of people have paid any attention to the details of the motion until today. Normally, people don't look at parliamentary the agenda until the day of the agenda. I normally don't. I come in and I have a look at it and I see what's happening. And so I think people will be astonished to discover that after the Prime Minister promised a debate on the arrest warrant, that is not what is listed on the order paper. And my guess is it's deliberate, that I think the government wants to minimise the rebellion on the Tory benches.
The government points out that the European arrest warrant is already part of UK law. But the Home Secretary, Theresa May, pledges the government will treat tonight's vote on the other required changes as if it included a specific vote on the warrant. But her Labour opposite number claims she's just playing with words and smells blood.
But why not let Parliament have the vote that they were promised? But the Home Secretary has gone one step further. It's a disappearing magic trick. 1 minute the European arrest warrant is there, the next minute it's gone. 1 minute you see it, the next minute it disappears. It's her Paul Daniels Act.
The Right Honourable Lady really doth protest too much on this matter. The vote on the next motion will be a vote on the regulations. The government is clear that we will be bound by that vote. And if this House votes against the regulation, then it will be voting against the government opting into all of the measures, including the European arrest warrant.
Tory rebels join the scorn being poured on the government's position.
This is a travesty of our parliamentary proceedings. And I'm sorry that the Home Secretary is shaking her head when I say this, because she knows perfectly well that this is a trick.
The motion that we have got before us to allocate time was allocated on the basis either of error or of falsehood. As I look down from here at the Treasury bench, I want to see something that is solid, but I am worried that it is made of increasingly crooked wood. We want to have it re-solidified, and we want this motion withdrawn. I didn't expect everybody to agree with me, particularly not those on the Treasury bench, but they've been playing fast and loose with procedures, and that is something the government simply can't be allowed to get away with. It undermines democracy if they cheat the system.
So my overlong time in this House of Commons has led me to understand that the growth of executive arrogance is unsupportable. And this is what so angers one. This is what brings this chamber into disrepair. We are not able to discuss the substance of what we stand for here, and that is wrong.
Amid the Tory rage, the Labour frontbencher Thomas Doherty walks across to the government side to confer with the Tory rebel Jacob Rees-Mogg. It looks an unlikely alliance. But behind the scenes, the Labour whips are marshalling their MPs for a surprise attack.
There's an email that we got from the whips. They're saying that there might be an early vote today. They want bodies in the chamber.
Labour support the European arrest warrant, but they've spotted an opportunity to defeat the government on one of the issues where it's most vulnerable.
We had a message off our party whips saying that a vote is imminent. So I'm going to make my way over to the chamber now, and hopefully we might catch the Tories on the hop.
At 1 minute to 7, Labour call for a vote not on the issue itself, but for the whole debate to be abandoned. Government ministers aren't expecting a challenge from the opposition. They're scattered all over London, believing there'll be a routine vote at 10 o'clock. Plans are hurriedly changed to get back to the Commons. At the Guildhall in the City of London, the Prime Minister is at the Lord Mayor's banquet, and he's brought news of Labour and the Tory rebels' surprise attack.
I say to the Right Honourable Lady, we had time for debate.
Theresa May keeps on talking so that the Tories have time to get more boots on the ground.
Put in place because there is no requirement in legislation for any measure to be put in place for the European arrest warrant, for us to remain in the European arrest warrant.
The government's completely caught by surprise, and what government MPs are now trying to do is filibuster so they get all their MPs back from dinner all over central London so they can vote that down. So Theresa May did a very long speech with lots of helpful interventions from her own backbenchers to try and keep the debate going.
Government whips scuttle back and forth as they seek to stave off the rebellion.
Well, I thought there was going to be a vote, and now it seems that it's being delayed to make sure there are enough people back. because it was coming much earlier than expected. And it seems to be taking a while, so I'm going to go and take my son to go and get him into his pyjamas so that he's ready for bed when the voter does eventually come. It's getting a bit late for him otherwise.
The Liberal Democrat Jenny Willett will be voting against the Labour motion that the question be not now put.
So it's a debate on whether the question should not now be put. And I will be voting no, so that the question should not now be put. You can see why people don't really understand the way that Parliament works when it's quite as archaic as that.
In the chamber, accusations of parliamentary chicanery fly on both sides.
This is an example of game playing on a crucial by the party opposite. A crucial matter.
At 8:05, the Tories can stall no longer, and the Labour motion to abandon the vote is finally put before the House.
Question is that the question be not now put.
Right, come on. You bring your car. Josh, you've got to go. Okay? Honestly don't know which way it's going to go today.
During votes, Jenny Willett must leave her son in the Lib Dem whip's office.
So Jack, your car? It's just Jack, your car. Good boy. Back in a sec.
What's the matter? Do you want to come inside?
Tory MPs arrive in full evening dress, having been summoned back before they could even start their starter.
The Prime Minister is in tails in there. He's come straight from a banquet at the Mansion House. That photograph he doesn't like.
It does look like he's been transported out of like the 1800s.
MPs stream back to the Commons right up to the voting deadline.
The ayes to the right, 229. The noes to the left, 272.
The government manages to win by 43 votes after one of the biggest Commons fiascos in recent history.
There are people sitting next to me who've been in the House for like decades just saying I've never seen anything like it. It was an absolute shambles and it was really badly mismanaged, but very exciting actually.
See you all later. See you tomorrow. Right.
The government's victory comes at the cost of widespread anger on the backbenches. And it's the Tory awkward squad who feel most aggrieved.
Of course, outside in the dog and duck, nobody will understand what's happened, but basically democracy lost and the government won. We were supposed to have a debate on the European arrest warrant and a vote on it. The government had promised it, and they just didn't do what they promised.
Amidst the political point scoring, the crucial question of how Britain's criminal justice and policing system should interact with Europe has scarcely been debated.
I think sort of party politics has got in the way a little bit, and I think it means that we haven't really had a debate on the merits of the actual motion, which I think is a shame, really.
Ten days after the debacle over the European arrest warrant, Mark Reckless becomes UKIP's second MP.
I'm just swear I understand.
On the day of Prime Minister's questions, Mark Reckless arrives early to reserve his seat on what's traditionally a Labour bench.
Douglas and I have sought to sit on this front bench down here and make at least part of it the new UKIP bench, and it looks like I've got in just in time.
You've nicked my spot. It's always a privilege. I hope there'll be more UKIP MPs nicking my spot in the future.
Fearful that someone may take his seat, Mark Reckless takes a photograph of his prayer card.
Sir,
Get the job done.
no photographs in the chamber.
I don't want Carswell or Reckless sitting in close proximity to me. I've got absolutely nothing in common with them two. I just wonder what the motives are for them two in particular to have chosen this particular place within the whole side of the House of Commons to sit in.
With the Liberal Democrats trailing badly in the polls, Jenny Willett has decided to return to the backbenches. She's resigned from the Whip's office to enable her to take a more public role as she fights to retain her seat in Wales.
I'm now going to the chamber to go for the first time to speak since I've been a whip. As a whip, you're not allowed to speak in the chamber, not allowed to speak at all. So this is going to be the first time that I've spoken from the backbenches for a few years now. I'm going to go and talk in a debate on Wales.
It's February the 2nd, 2015. Steve Rotherham is meeting with Frances Malloy, who's returned to Parliament to receive a printed and bound copy of the bill inspired by the death of her son.
There are a couple of copies for you.
Thank you so much. That looks really good, doesn't it? It's only taken you 18 months, hasn't it?
I didn't expect to get this emotion.
Perhaps you prevent other people going through what you're going through.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for your support and work.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
Not
Cheers,
at all.
Kate. Ta-ra. We still haven't given up hope that we'll get it through on second reading. But if for some reason that we're not able to do it then, this doesn't go to waste. This is there, it's on the shelf and ready for us to push whatever might happen after the 7th of May.
I won't give up.
No.
I'll wear the government down before they wear me down.
Mm.
And your lot if they get in.
I'll be there supporting you. I'll be there fighting your corner.
It's now almost impossible for Steve Rotherham's bill to be passed into law before the general election, but it may be included in his party's manifesto and could yet be passed in the next Parliament. The last year has seen a fracturing of our party system and the loosening of the grip of the whips. So voters in the coming election will have to decide whether they want as their MPs those who play the Commons game by its old rules or the new ones. Next time, in the final instalment of Inside the Commons, the House is rocked by a battle over its future. The palace seeks new ways to earn its keep.
As you can see, it's a slightly more bling effect.
And the whole Westminster system is challenged.
Parliament has not been doing its job for a very long time.
Are you interested in finding out more about the topics raised in this series? Then go to bbc.co.uk/Inside the Commons and follow the links to the Open University, where you can watch topical roundtable discussions and get an insight into the making of the series.
Poor Buddy the dog has some problems, and what's worse, Rod Gilbert's on hand to help sort things out. Work experience is at a vet's next, although he should maybe stick to being a comedian.